Are you all ready to join me today in our trip to outer space?
Come along quietly or not.
I will talk to you of art. For there is nothing else. Some artist made a hook. Yes. Let you bite upon it.
Classy. And now, without further ado,
hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Planet Shivers podcast. I am, and always will be, Albert Shivers, and it's a big episode today. Finally, the long-awaited return of Luke and Andrew. They are back on the show. These two guys put Siskel and Ebert to shame. Today, with the movie topic we chose was biopics, movies about true things. The three of us get into all different aspects of biographical movies, and we really sink our teeth into what is artistic license and what isn't when it comes to making a movie that is biographical about a musician, about a real life athlete, or a political event. We cover a lot of stuff. Before I get to Luke and Andrew, though, I want to give you guys a couple of updates. First of all, finally, after all the advice and all the nudging, I am building my own website. This will be all-in-one stop for everything I'm up to. All my art stuff will be there, and all my podcast stuff will be there. Movies will be there, as well as updates as what's going on, if I'm having new shows or new screenings. All the information will be in one place, and it'll direct you to everywhere else you need to go to find what you're looking for. My estimated time to have this done, I'm hoping that this website's up and running by the beginning of next week. I'm having some serious help on it from a young lady named Selena who's doing great. And so far we're kicking some serious ass on it, and the website should be done by next week. Secondly, I still have art up at the Create and Be Art Studio in Stroudsburg, PA. This month they did their mental health awareness show, and I was excited to be a part of that. I'm going to be posting pictures of my art from the show very soon. And thirdly, I'm beginning to do live streaming of art. So basically, I have no set schedule for this. It's really when the mood strikes me and the breeze takes me away. I'm going to jump on live streams either on Facebook or on Instagram. It could be one or the other. I've tried both. I did a little bit the other day. And it will simply be me working on whatever piece of art I'm working on, if you have any interest, along with some of the weirdest and most entertaining music I could find to play in the background. Now, because of the way things are, you're going to want to catch these live streams when they're live, because once they get re-uploaded, Facebook and Instagram get their panties in a bunch and start muting everything in the background. So if you want to hear the crazy music, you got to tune in while it's live. I'll be working on whatever art I happen to be doing at the moment. So if you see me going, give me a hello, see what's going on. Like I said, there's no set time. I'm just going to randomly appear on your social media platform with my markers out. Right now, I'm working on a surreal portrait of a very good friend of mine, Kim, who, by the way, also went to school with not only me, but also Luke and Andrew. So how's that for some synchrogoddamnicity right there? So far, the portrait's coming out good. You'll be able to see the finished product on my Instagram, @AlbertShivers. Now, the last thing I wanted to share with you all before we get to the show is a little bit more on just the informative side of things. If you haven't seen me lately, if I haven't been around, if you haven't seen me out, or even if you haven't heard from me lately, I want to tell you why. You see, I've discovered this great new hangout. This place is right here in the town I live in. I love being there. This joint plays the best music, always music I'm in the mood for. It has some of the greatest personalities all the celebrities there, beautiful women. The place has great food, just what I'm always in the mood for. And better than all that, it's open 24 hours a day. I gotta be honest with you folks, I feel like Gatsby when I'm here. Okay, it's the best place. And I'm gonna tell you, it's just between you and I though. But the name of this club that I've been hanging out in, spending so much time in, is called In My Own Head. It's a great place. Really, for me, it's the place to be. In my own head. That's where I've been at. That's why you haven't seen me. Most important thing is I'm enjoying the hell out of myself. With all that said, you could find more of what I'm up to on Instagram at Albert Shivers or over on Facebook, simply Albert Shivers. Friend me, say hello, talk to a living, breathing artist. I hope you enjoy my conversation with my friends Luke and Andrew. I really enjoyed. We recorded this podcast a while back, and it really was a pleasure to go back through editing and listening to it. With all that said, here is Luke and Andrew. Enjoy, and I'll talk to you on the other side of the conversation after this message.
Is Elvis alive? Hear what could be the incredible Elvis phone call. Listen to the newest and longest recording ever, just released from the original taped conversation purportedly of Elvis recorded about 4 years after the 16th of August, 1977. Call 1-900-909-ELVIS. Call now. Experience what may be the most shocking story of our time.
I'm Tony Viagra. Against your comedy. I listen to Planet Shivers podcast, and you better too.
Biographical movies. Movies about real people, whether they're good or not. We're going to cover it from the good and the bad. So we bantered a little bit before we started to record. So Luke, why don't you start us off? Let's get into it.
Okay. One of the most recent biopic movies, which is undoubtedly stirring a lot of controversy online, is the new movie Mank with Gary Oldman, which is about the screenwriter who shared credit with Orson Welles on the creation of Citizen Kane. I'm not going to elaborate on this movie too much because there are countless video essays that have already touched on it, but that movie is a perfect example of how Hollywood can glorify a certain side of the story or a mythical side of a story as opposed to actually being true to what really happened, because the movie makes it look like Mank really, Gary Oldman's character really wrote Citizen Kane, almost down to the letter, and that Orson Welles had very little to do other than yelling at him about it over the phone. Whereas in real life, anyone who does any digging actually knows that while Mank did a lot, Welles was doing constant rewrites as they were filming the actual movie. And so, this of course raises questions as to why they went in this direction. I know that the most obvious reason is that the movie was directed by David Fincher, and it was based on a script that his late father, Jason Fincher, I think, had written before he passed away, and it had been a passion project that David Fincher had been working on for years. But why his father wrote it that way, I don't know if he had been influenced by the now debunked essay written by Pauline Kael, or what other evidence he was into, or if he just thought that the story sounded more interesting if he painted Mank as the underdog. But that's an example of how much Hollywood, filmmakers can shift the story to untruth just to make it more Hollywoodified, to make it more interesting. So it's one of the... Now, does that make it a bad movie? Not necessarily, as long as you go in with the understanding this is just a movie. This is not what actually happened. So don't take this as a history lesson. Now, on the other hand, you have movies like Raging Bull, which is one of the most famous biopics of all time, directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci in the role that made him a household name, and Kathy Moriarty, also her breakout role.
Right.
That movie was actually based on the real Jake LaMotta's autobiography. De Niro read that biography, I think, 8 years before they did the movie, and he had been begging his friend Marty to make that movie, even though Marty had no interest in boxing, and he only finally got him to do it after Scorsese almost died from a cocaine overdose, and they decided, that giving him a new project to focus on would keep his mind off the drugs and help him get his act together. And they decided, okay, how about that movie I've been begging you to do for 8 years? Okay, let's do it. Mm-hmm. So to prepare for the role, and again, not, going just briefly touching on our rants about method acting, not all method acting is bad. It's when you don't make it other people's problem, it's okay. So some of the things that De Niro did to prepare for that role really worked. He actually trained for a year with the real Jake LaMotta as a sparring partner and became so good that LaMotta tried to get him to quit acting and become a boxer full time. Mm-hmm. So that gives you an idea. And they also filmed the movie more or less in chronological order. After he had gotten in the best shape he could be in, they filmed all the fight scenes. Then, by the time they finished filming the fight scenes, they did all the scenes where he was in between fights, out of shape, just talking, getting the relationships with his brother and his wife and everything. And then, of course, they, for the last half of the movie, when he was retired, they took a break and let him put on weight, so that he could play the retired LaMotta when he got a nightclub and became a stand-up comedian. So it's. From what I understand, it's much closer, although, again, some creative liberties were taken. Allegedly, the real LaMotta actually went to see the movie with his ex-wife, and when he saw the movie, he looked at his wife and he said, "Was I really that bad? Honey, you was even worse." and supposedly, and this is one of the funniest parts of De Niro's Oscar acceptance speech, "I want to thank Jake LaMotta. I also want to thank Joey LaMotta, even though he's suing us." So I don't know what Joey LaMotta's beef was like, if he thought
I think with Joey LaMotta, I think it was the whole thing, them saying that he had an affair with Jake LaMotta's ex-wife, but they didn't come right out and say it, but it was heavily implied.
Yes.
But and the fact it was actually a friend of theirs that Jake LaMotta beat up because he thought he was having an affair with his ex-wife. But, so that could be the reason. But, maybe he wasn't paid or he didn't get any rights or credits.
That's possible as well. So that's an example of a movie. Again, you should do your own research, but if you want the abridged version, I think that's an example of a biopic that, from what I understand, is much closer to what happened in real life, telling the real story as more or less as it was.
Gotcha.
And then sticking with the boxing theme, then you have the movie Cinderella Man with Russell Crowe, where they did a lot of historical accuracies, but the one thing that was is most often talked about was the way Max Baer was portrayed in that movie, whose his children, family tried to sue or bring down the production because they didn't like the way their father was portrayed. Max Baer's son was an actor, Max Baer Jr., who was on Beverly Hillbillies.
Yeah.
Because they made him out to be like this Mr. T, Ivan Drago, who took pleasure in hurting people, but you have to understand that they're trying to, they want him to look as much of an underdog as they can. He's older than most fighters that get a shot at the title. They want it to look like all the odds are against him, going against this huge, mean, nasty bully. If they say that he's going against a guy who walks little ladies across the street and visits children's hosples.
Right.
There's
no suspense and tension in the movie.
Yeah.
So it's always this tightrope act of how much do you stay true to what happened in real life versus how much do you follow the movie formula for suspense and tension, for glorification, for entertainment value.
Now, like it sounds like, and I'm right with you guys. I think that there does. We understand why.
Yes.
So I would personally say that I don't mind that.
Yeah.
I understand that a movie is a movie. And if to me personally, if I want to learn more about this boxer, I'll go look him up.
Do your research.
Exactly.
See, read his biography.
Yeah. So, how do you guys feel about those movies taking those artistic liberties, let's say, of enhancing a villain or enhancing the protagonist? Naturally, I'm sure movies can go overboard in either direction, and it could be too much.
Yes.
But there's one movie that comes to mind, which is Bessie. Queen Latifah plays Bessie Smith. Now, in that movie, it's Bessie Smith's whole life, right? Now, in reality, Bessie Smith died very tragically. Okay, she was in a car accident. She was bleeding, and a white hospital wouldn't take her because she was black, and she died. Just to be plain.
Yeah.
In the movie, she meets a guy and lives happily ever after. They don't include her real life ending, and I sat back and said, okay, wait a minute. Let's I'm a seeker of the truth, but why leave people in a bad mood? Why stick it to them right at the end?
Yeah.
If you're that interested, like me, you'll go look and you'll hear the unfortunate story of her death. So to me, it was a little bit of a fib.
Yeah.
To leave it, she meets a new guy, they live happily ever after. It's a little bit of a white lie, but I was okay with that white lie for the sake of the film.
Yeah.
Oh, then you can get into the movie Ray with Jamie Foxx about Ray Charles, great African American blind musician.
Right.
For those of you music lovers out there, something you might find interesting is Jamie Foxx actually really played the piano for his film role. He went to school on a national piano scholarship. So when you see him playing the piano, that was really Jamie Foxx.
Right.
And he did all kinds of method acting. He learned how to read Braille. I think he put thing like matter over his eyes. So he could have the image of being blind.
Right.
But the singing, however, he did lip sync because Jamie Foxx is a great he's a Grammy Award winning music artist.
Yeah.
He still, because he wanted it to be Ray Charles' voice, and Ray Charles was still alive while they were making that movie. That's adds to its authenticity.
Yeah.
Or makes it authentic. But that ending, it says he never touched heroin again. That's wonderful. That's great. But it doesn't tell you that he still smoked marijuana. He still drank like a fish. He never touched hard drugs again. Good for wonderful. He still slept with anything in a skirt. I'm not saying, and he even said before that being blind, he didn't think he had long to live. So he said, I'll live my life however I want to. If I want to do this, I'll do it. But he said if he knew he would have lived as long as he did, he would have taken better care of himself.
Okay.
But again, like you said with the ending, he kept his promise. He never touched heroin ever again. Great, wonderful, but he wasn't completely clean, like that, like you would think. I guess you can't ask for everything, but yeah.
I think when it comes to where you draw the line with artistic liberties as to whether you're going too far or you're within reason, a lot of it has to do with intention and how seriously the movie is received. Like if the audience at large knows that it's just a movie, it will probably be fine, and you can probably get away with whatever you want. But if you're really actively trying to paint a different picture from what really happened, you could not only be offending the real people that the story is depicting, but you could also be sending a really bad message. And one of the most infamous examples of that is Green Book with Viggo Mortensen and Mahershala Ali. When I saw that movie in the theater, I thought it was an excellent film. I thought it was very funny, and I loved the chemistry between Mortensen and Ali. But this is an example of how hype can kill a movie. As soon as it got nominated for Best Picture, my interest in the movie plummeted, and when it won, I was hurt. Like, it's a buddy comedy. It's not that good. And when I've since done more research, I've learned that movie, and the people, especially the family of Mahershala Ali's character, have dubbed the movie a symphony of lies. They said, they show him in the movie, they make it look like, there's a scene when they're driving the car, when they're in the car, and Mortensen's character hands Ali, fried chicken, which Ali's character claims he had never had before, and they're like, that is so, like they're trying to paint this picture that the white guy is more worldly and more traveled and more knowledgeable about the way things work, even down to the simple things like eating junk food like fried chicken with your hands as opposed to eating really fancy food with utensils. And it's like, if this, I would almost think if this wasn't based on a true story, it wouldn't upset me that much. Or if they had left that in, but the movie didn't get so much Oscar hype, it might not bother me as much. But the fact that it got nominated for Oscars, and the studio obviously had to promote it in order for that to happen, and it won, leaves the impression they're trying to whitewash history and make it look like this is the story that ended racism, and this is all about how one white guy can change racism, and how racism is just a product of a few bad apples. There's nothing systemic about it, and so on. And that's an example of where they go too far with artistic liberties. So that's if they hadn't promoted it to the Oscars, if they had just made it as a simple buddy comedy movie, and they said it's inspired by true events, but take it with a grain of salt. If you want to know what really happened, just do your research. Right. That would have been fine. Yeah. Or if they did try to tell the actual story and then promoted it to the Oscars, that would have been fine too. They tried to have it both ways. They half-hearted it and promoted it to the Oscars. It's like, no.
Yeah.
Then you get into situations like The Greatest Showman.
Yeah.
Great musical, great music, great family friendly, feel good movie, but that was nothing what P.T. Barnum was like. Right. He was the complete opposite of the way Hugh Jackman played him. Or great movie, music, but they were not true at all to what P.T. Barnum was. He's the man that coined the phrase, "A sucker is born every minute."
Yeah.
What makes people all over America break down and cry like this? Call 1-900-9099-CRY and hear it for yourself. $2 for the first minute, 45 cents each additional minute. If you're under 18, ask your parents before you call. 1-900-9099-CRY.
And they made it out like, it was the papers that made that's who the man was. I think he even went as far as he paid tickets to have one of his performers. Well, when they passed away, he sold tickets to her autopsy.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I can't. Then the whole he he was a loving father and husband. Like the day after his wife died, he married his mistress. It's a good movie to watch, but then you hear I think that's common knowledge about P.T. Barnum.
Mm-hmm. Now the question is, was that movie nominated for Best Picture? I know it won Best Song, but was it nominated for Best Picture? Or
It was nominated for Best Song, but I don't think it won Best Song.
Oh, okay.
Hugh Jack. It was nominated for a bunch of Golden Globes, but I don't think it got the Best Picture.
Okay, all right. Now in that case, I'm okay with that. I think more or less once. Because of the common knowledge, I think when that movie came out, people walked into that movie knowing it's inspired, but it's not the real thing. We're not here to take it seriously. We're just here to kick back and have a good time.
Yeah. And that gray area is where things can go wrong.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not, a person can go into that movie and take it for exactly what it is. My personal opinion, and I'll own this opinion, I won't put it on you guys, is that the average movie goer doesn't care to know the difference between inspired by a true story, whatever verbiage they put there. It's just, true story. And I've been guilty of it too. True story. Now, I was thinking about the movie Cadillac Records, which was about chess records. And the Chess Brothers with Beyonce as Etta James, Muddy Waters, I don't remember the actor who played him, Mos Def played Chuck Berry, and a hell of an actor played Howlin' Wolf. I don't know the man's name. Howlin' Wolf was a kind of a side role, but he played the hell out of it. But anyway, there were two chess brothers, and in the movie, there's only one. Now, and it's played by Adrian Brody.
Okay.
Now, that's a pretty big thing. Like the fact two brothers make a record label and it blows up. Like that always was weird to me. Like, why'd you limit the brother? Like, did you just not want to write for two brothers? And knowing the real story, I could see that they just crammed both brothers into one guy. They just made one brother out of two.
And they've been known to do that sometimes. More often with villains, I think. Or who's shown to be the villain. It's based on three people who were against them, but we just crammed them into one awful person.
Yeah. Gotcha. That happens a lot, even in movies that are based on pure fiction, like that, like with the Shawshank Redemption. I think there were multiple in the book there were multiple wardens, but I think in the movie they just crammed it all into one guy.
Then a movie that I saw, it's you go back to the classics. James Cagney and Yankee Doodle, with George M. Cohan.
Yeah.
A lot of people in the industry didn't want to do that. James Cagney didn't want to play that character. Didn't want to be involved with the movie because they all knew George M. Cohan and they hated him.
Okay.
Because he was very he had a swollen head. He was because they thought he was a jerk.
Right.
And and he then you find out because in the movie he's he was an honest man. He had a handshake agreement with his partner. Then you find out that he manipulated things to get his theaters over a lot more And he did. Yeah, he was a patriot. He won the medal, but he also piggybacked off a lot of other people's ideas.
Yeah. So you mentioned before about musicians, or actors playing musicians and actually playing the instruments. Another film I wanted to bring up on that title, on that theme, is Sweet and Low Down, with Sean Penn playing a version of Django Reinhardt, and learned how to play intricate gypsy guitar of the 20s and 30s. And I think we can go through even more biopics where they were about singers. And they would try to find an actor who could sing. And then every once in a while, they would just do overdubs, which I was always able to pick out those. This is always a little something that was off with an overdub.
Yeah. Well, it's not just biopics, too. You go back to old musicals, Oklahoma, West Side Story. Okay. Natalie Wood, beautiful. She could probably really sing, but
I don't think she had the correct range for the notes, so she was dubbed by Broadway singer Marty Nixon.
Yes,
Marty Nixon was like the go-to soprano dubber for West Side Story, for The King and I, for Deborah Carr, and for and for Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady. Yeah. Okay.
Oklahoma is Rod Steiger. I'm not sure who did the singing for him, but his voice was dubbed. He had the right build for what they wanted the character to look like. But you open his mouth and you hear this operatic aria. I'm not saying. I'm sure Rod Steiger could sing. Right. But he couldn't. I can't see him being a tenor.
Yeah.
That was one situation where it was a little outrageous.
Yeah. Gotcha.
But that movie was 55.
Okay.
And even the movie I recommended on one of the shows you had us on, American Satan. All the musicians really played their own instruments, but the lead singer, who's really again, he can really sing. He's from he has his own rock band, but his voice didn't match what they wanted, right. So he lip synced.
Okay, gotcha.
And there are. All kinds of situations like that, and but when an actor can really whether it's Ryan Gosling in La La Land really playing the piano, Miles Teller in Whiplash playing the drums. I think that say what you want about La La Land, but I think I think that you put you play the piano, you sing, you dance. That's a lot of skill.
Yes.
You can't. Miles Teller. I know J.K. Simmons in that movie Whiplash. It was a great movie. He did. J.K. Simmons won his Oscar for that movie. Great performance, but I really think Miles Teller got the shaft in that movie. Playing the drums until your hands bleed and stuff. Maybe I just think a lot of it because I can't play an instrument, but I just the whole and I've talked to people who are musicians, and they said that's what you have to do to you go through when you're playing the drums, you go through multiple sticks. You're buying drumsticks all the time.
Well, I think it's also a bit of a throwback because there was a time when you had to be multi-talented.
That's true.
If we go back to the Marx Brothers, every one of them played an instrument and did their shtick. So it was, it was almost the norm. Like, you almost had to be able to do more than one thing.
Yeah.
You couldn't just act.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time when, like, you had to be able to be funny. You had to be able to dance.
Mm-hmm.
You
to
had
some degree.
You had to be able to do stage combat, especially fencing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Especially those old action movies.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to the movie Chaplin with Robert Downey Jr.
Okay.
I know everybody out there knows him as Iron Man. Or I Am Iron Man. But 1990, I think that movie came out. Before he even touched Iron Man was even dreamed of.
Yeah.
The movie. He was doing movies like that where he played Charlie Chaplin, and and that's one of those movies where I think they, captured his life pretty well. I mean, I never read his biography, but I mean, they didn't shy away from the fact that he never slept with a woman under 20 years or over 20 years old.
Yeah. And that J. Edgar Hoover was hunting him like wild game throughout his life and doing everything to to throw him under the bus, or any other scandal involved with him, and of course the controversy around some of his films like The Great Dictator and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So
let's go way off the beaten path and touch on biopics that could technically be biography or historical based, but go completely like absurd. And one that comes to mind, so like the recent Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds. So it's rooted in some sort of factual thing. There was a troop of American soldiers who had that job. They were a little bit of renegades, so that existed. Hitler existed.
Yeah.
So elements of that movie was factual, biographical, but then it goes in all sorts. Takes plenty of artistic license, not even trying to paint it, as a real story. And there are a handful of those kind of movies as well.
Yes, I think probably one of the most infamous examples would have been of that type of off the rail, inspired by history, but really has nothing to do with it, is Mel Gibson's Braveheart. I think it very famously, has nothing to do with what actually happened. In that movie, he makes, you have Mel Gibson, who's a guy of average height and build, playing William Wallace, and he makes it out like he's this very educated, multilingual scholar. In real life, he was supposed to be this nearly 7-foot giant who actually probably didn't speak, who was probably monolingual, wasn't nearly as sophisticated and clever as the movie made him out to be. And they also, in that movie, they make the Scots look like they're all underdogs and complete victims, whereas in real life they were at least as brutal as the English.
Right.
Yeah. So, and the movie also makes it look like he had an affair and impregnated the Queen of England, even though in real life she was
only a child.
Yeah, she was only a child. They never even met.
That's a stretch.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing.
Yeah, I know.
Well, two films that when you bring that up that come to mind are one's the movie Cool Runnings with John Candy. If you've never seen this movie, I highly recommend it. It's a great feel-good movie. John Candy's performance in it is probably his most underrated of all time. He gives one of the greatest performances of his career. But it's just a fact. The movie is not accurate. There was a Jamaican bobsled team, yes, but his character didn't even exist. The person that he's that there was no, they had tons of coaches for the Jamaican bobsled team, but none of them were involved with any cheating scandal. And I mean, the American team, U.S. team, hadn't even won the gold medal since 1948. and until 2010.
Right.
So that part of it didn't exist. The Jamaican team didn't face any racial prejudice when they went to and the team when they went to the Olympics, and the team was not runners who failed to make it to the Summer Olympics. The tryouts for the Summer Olympics hadn't even happened.
Right.
Those runners, all the members of the team were members of the Jamaican military. Mm-hmm. All the people who they were sprinters, but right. But they weren't. They hadn't. I'm sure they wanted to be on the Olympic team, but the coaches came to them and said, "We want to compete in the bobsled for the Olympics," and they all said, "Hey, to compete in the Olympics, that's a great, great honor." They trained, and they originally were only going to compete in the 2-man sled. Because you have the 4-man sled and the 2-man sled. Yeah. They had two teammates in for the 2-man sled. Then they got there and they said, "Hey, while we're here, we got 4 people. Let's do the 4-man sled." Yeah. And that's what ultimately caused their crash, because they hadn't trained with a 4-man sled. The movie makes it out to be there was a problem with the sled. Right. But it was actually just a problem with, accidents can happen with those sleds real easy. The driver just made a false turn, and right. It just, and their heroic ending, the applause, beautiful music. It was more like dragging the sled and limping across the finish line. Right. And in another movie, is that's why that's very because Cool Runnings was made by Disney. Mm-hmm. Another one that's in that category that's very Disneyfied, as they say, the movie Remember the Titans. Yeah. Another great movie, feel good movie. Overcoming adversity. Wonderful acting, but Denzel Washington, great performance, but it's just a fact. Everybody, there was racial tension that go on, but with the team it was competitive. It was they were going and the tension between Herman Boone and the other coach on the team, it was a pride thing. The other coach, he just had a winning season, just won the championship, and he's being tossed to the side. It's a pride thing. Like Luke, say you were cast as the lead in a big show, and you learned your lines, you did your research, and everything you have to do, and then all of a sudden the director comes to you and says, instead of we found out that another theater across the street is doing the exact same show, and they're planning on doing it the exact same week we are, and instead of competing with them, we're just going to combine together, make one super show, and we're going to have the lead in that show be the lead, and you're just going to be in the chorus. I mean, I don't know about you, but my pride would hurt me.
It would hurt me too. Yeah, that would drive me nuts.
I'd be upset. I mean, that's what caused all the tension, all the players and coaches and that team. And the racial thing was. It may have existed, but it was mostly secondary. Right. But they made it. And they added the daughter of the one coach. Because Disney, you have to have kids. Yeah. but really, there was he really had daughters, but they came to all the games, but she didn't coach or tell the players hustle more, and they made it out like all the other teams they played were white, and really when the integration happened, that happened to all the schools in that area,
right?
And all the other teams were all black and white. Again, I'm not great films. Feel good films.
Yeah.
Right. If you if you want, you watch them. Family friendly, but accuracy not so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it goes right back to they're good movies, like you said, but there's still things in there that to appeal to the broadest of audiences and to the hook. I feel like adding in a kid, adding in tensions that weren't there, is a hook.
Going back to the whole political films, you talk about the movie JFK. Basically, people have to take that with a grain, and I don't even know if it says based on true story. Basically, that movie was just all the conspiracy theories just jammed into one movie. Whether they were accurate or not, I don't know. But they're all those the magic bullet, all this, and the Tommy Lee Jones character really existed. Same thing with Kevin Costner's character, and he was Clay Shaw, I believe, was put on trial by Kevin Costner's character, but it didn't last as long. It never went to a jury or a judge, and it because of a witness changed his testimony.
Gotcha.
I mean, it didn't. It wasn't dragged out as long as it appeared. Even if if it went to trial, it was briefly.
Gotcha. So on that note, let's start throwing some recommendations at the people. Luke, why don't you start us off?
Okay. I've got two very different ones that I'll discuss very briefly. One is To Hell and Back, which is based on the autobiography by the most decorated soldier of all time, Audie Murphy, about his experiences in Europe during World War II. This is the exact opposite of the off-the-rail history epics that we're used to getting, because the studio Universal desperately wanted to adapt the book into a film, which Murphy didn't want because he did not want it to glorify war. And even when he finally relented, he didn't want to play himself. He wanted a better actor like Tony Curtis to play the part, and they said, no, we want the real thing. So they got him into it, but he only agreed to do it on the condition that they would tone down his heroic exploits, most notably the climatic shootout where he's on top of a downed tank using a .50 caliber machine gun to hold off an entire battalion of German troops. In real life, it apparently lasted for over an hour, whereas in the movie it only lasts 2 minutes. Right. So it's the example of that movie is a very intriguing case of humility being dragged kicking and screaming onto its own depiction on screen, and how the guy is trying not to glorify himself, but the studio really wanted him to for the bottom line.
Right.
So, and you get to see Audie Murphy playing himself in one of the strangest ways you will ever see anybody play themselves, like acting out their own trauma in a movie that's not a documentary, technically. And the other one, tying back to our good old friend Lon Chaney Sr., there is a biopic about Lon Chaney called Man of a Thousand Faces, starring James Cagney in the part. Came out in 1957, I believe. Takes a lot of creative liberties, adds some drama where there wasn't any, and so on. But it does go through his life as a live stage performer, and his money troubles that forced him to get into movies, how he used his makeup to stand out from the crowd and become a bigger star, his second marriage, it touches briefly on his relationship with his son. And of course, the prejudices that he faced throughout his life regarding being the son of deaf parents. Some of that drama, which may have been exaggerated for dramatic and entertainment purposes in the film, but is still nonetheless interesting. And James Cagney, who I'm just about convinced could do no wrong, is excellent as Lon Chaney.
Nice.
Beware, though, the movie does not do a good job depicting Lon Chaney's makeup. The makeup in this biopic looks terrible.
That would be a hard act to follow.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm done.
Okay. Andrew, what you got?
Two that I'd like to touch on. One was a HBO film made in 1998. It was about the Rat Pack. Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Martin, Pierre Lawford, Joey Bishop, Ray Liotta, Don Cheadle, Joe Mantegna. It's a great look at the and how that group kind of came to be. It also gets into John F. Kennedy and Frank Sinatra's influence on getting him elected as president. And at a time where Frank Sinatra was trying to change his image, and me being a fan of all those guys, it gets into going back to what we said about the music. You got to see, Sammy Davis Jr. was really the breakout artist of that whole group. He was. He played his own instruments. He sang. He danced. He did gun tricks, comedy impressions. Then you had Dean Martin, who's just a natural. He's just so gifted. He, kind of into his, where you could perceive him as lazy, but to all of us, regular actors, who train and he's just a natural talent. He shows up, right before they're about to film, and he just nails everything perfectly. Then the whole relationship between Pierre Lawford and Frank Sinatra and the making of Ocean's 11, and what split them up, and the breakdown there. And then my second pick, it's not actually about actor, but I consider it a biopic. It's called Fruitville Station. It was starring Michael B. Jordan. It's about Oscar Isaacs, who was murdered by a police officer. It kind of takes you on a trip through the day before his murder. It starts off, him, taking his daughter to school, him, trying to get his job back, his relationship with his girlfriend, mother of child, to, his eventual murder, and that's one of those movies that it's tragic. The person became, I guess, would you say, infamous? But it's it was also a big competitor at Sundance. I think it won. It was in the 2010. It won the Sundance Film Festival, and it was. I may have said this already before, but it was Michael B. Jordan's first starring role in film before Black Panther and Creed. And
it's by the same director of Creed.
Yes.
Nice. My movie is one that has not been made, only talked about, but I really want to see it happen, which is comedian Tracy Morgan has been expressing an interest in playing Louis Armstrong. in a movie, and I will be the first person in line to see that one. I really like Tracy Morgan.
Oh yeah.
And I love Louis Armstrong, and I think he would be perfect for that role.
For the role of Louis Armstrong,
I'm
you'd
ready.
be fantastic.
Yeah, because our lives run parallel. I really believe this is a beautiful world. With all the scams and drudgery and broken dreams, it's still a beautiful place to be.
I think that there are very few comedic actors who can't kill it with drama.
Mm-hmm.
I think Tracy Morgan can definitely pull that role off, and I hope he does.
Yeah, there are so many films out there that you wish will be made, but they haven't gotten the green light for one reason or another. But
yeah, so I'm putting it out there now.
Well, I'd like to see it too. We want it made.
Yep.
Yeah.
You hear us, Hollywood? Make it happen.
So on that note, guys, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks for doing another episode of Planet Shivers. Yeah. It's always good to have you guys on. And yeah, cool runnings.
Yeah. Feel the rhythm, feel the ride. Get on up, it's bobsled time.
What a podcast, folks. I want to thank Luke and Andrew for coming on the show yet again. And I look forward to having them back on to talk more movies and maybe other stuff too. You never know. You could find this episode of the Planet Shivers podcast and a whole lot more, all the episodes really, on every major podcast platform and YouTube. You could find out more of what I'm up to on Instagram at Albert Shivers and on Facebook, Albert Shivers. Keep your ears open and your eyes peeled for the new website. I'll keep everybody updated. And also don't forget to check out the Albert Shivers Patreon page and know that the podcast is now accepting tips through Cash App, $, Shivers Art is the handle to send the tips to if you feel like it. Honestly, I'm happy that you're just listening. Got a lot of good guests coming up, as I say, but I mean it. I'm not lying to you. Why would I lie to you? I love you guys. Why would I lie? Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of somebody else, and I'll catch you on the next podcast. Be well.